Eleanor Price sat on the edge of her bed with her black funeral dress still on, even though the sun had already set and the house had gone quiet. The living room smelled like lilies and cold coffee. Every lamp was on, like light could keep the grief from crawling into the corners. Her hands would not stop shaking. On the nightstand, Hal's old work watch lay face up, the leather strap cracked, the second hand still ticking because she had wound it out of habit this morning. Then remembered there would be no "this morning" for him ever again. A week ago, her husband had been alive. He had been standing at the kitchen sink, humming off-key, rinsing a dinner plate like it was the most ordinary thing in the world. Then his hand went to his chest, his face tightened, and he slid down the cabinet like a man folding into himself. By the time the ambulance lights washed the driveway red and blue, Hal was already gone. People kept telling Eleanor, "At least it was quick," as if quick meant kind. Now she was alone in the house they had paid off with decades of overtime and skipped vacations. Alone with the silence that used to be filled with Hal's throat clearing, his newspaper pages turning, the squeak of his chair. Alone with the question she could not stop asking, why did he look so scared right before he fell? She had replayed it in her mind 100 times, not just the pain, the panic. Tonight she tried to do what everyone said would help. Keep busy, sort things, put away his clothes, pack the reminders. She opened Hal's closet and pressed her face into his flannel shirts. They still smelled like sawdust and that cheap aftershave he never stopped using. Her knees nearly buckled. "Okay," she whispered into the cloth, like she was negotiating with her own heart. "Okay, one box at a time." There was a cardboard box on the floor labeled in Hal's handwriting, "Garage. Tools." She didn't remember seeing it before. She carried it to the bed and lifted the lid. Inside were screwdrivers, a tape measure, a handful of rusty bolts, and a small, dented metal tin, the kind people kept cookies in, except this tin had black electrical tape wrapped around it. Eleanor stared at the tape. Hal was tidy. Hal was careful. Hal didn't wrap things like this unless he didn't want them opened. Her fingers hesitated, then peeled the tape back. The sound of it tearing was too loud in the room. The lid popped off. Inside were letters. Dozens of them, bundled in twine, each envelope yellowed at the edges. Some were addressed to H. Price. Some had no address at all. And on top, as if it had been placed there last, was one envelope with her name written in thick, shaky ink. Eleanor read this first. Her breath caught. She could hear her own pulse in her ears. She looked at the door like someone might walk in and catch her reading it, but there was no one left to catch her. Her thumb slid under the flap. She tore it open. The paper inside was folded twice, creased hard, like it had been refolded 1,000 times. Hal's handwriting filled the page, and the first line hit her like a cold hand on the back of her neck. "Ellie, if you're reading this, it means I've failed to keep you safe." Her vision blurred instantly. She pressed the letter to her chest, then forced herself to read the next sentence through the tears. "There are people who will come for this house. They will tell you I was a liar. They will tell you you owe them. Do not believe a single word until you read all of these." Eleanor's mouth went dry. Come for the house? They were retired. They were paid up. They had never missed a mortgage payment in their lives. Hal had been proud of that. He had said, "They can't take what we own." Her hands shook so badly she almost dropped the letter. She turned the page. "I did what I did because I loved you more than my own name. I signed things you never saw. I took blame you never deserved, and I paid for it the only way they would accept." Eleanor's stomach rolled. She could not understand the words, but she could feel their weight. A secret heavy enough to bend a man's spine. A secret Hal had carried alone, even in bed beside her, even at the breakfast table, even when he held her hand at church. At the bottom of the letter Hal had written one more line, underlined twice, like a warning carved into wood. "They think you don't know. They think you are still the weak one. Prove them wrong." Eleanor lowered the paper slowly. The room felt smaller, like the walls had moved in. For the first time since the night Hal died, the grief cracked open, and something else climbed out. Fear. And underneath it, a terrible clarity. Her husband had not just died. He had been running out of time. Eleanor wiped her face with the back of her hand. She looked down at the bundle of letters, all those years sealed shut, and she whispered into the empty room, "Hal, what did you do?" And before the question could fade, someone knocked on the front door. The knocking came again, harder this time, like the person on the porch had already decided she should be afraid. Eleanor folded Hal's letter with careful hands and slid it back into the envelope. Then she hid the entire tin under a stack of sweaters in the closet, not because she wanted to hide it from the world, but because her instincts, old instincts, told her that secrets were safest when they were not in plain sight. She walked down the hall, one hand on the wall to steady herself. The house creaked the way it always had, but tonight every sound felt like it belonged to a stranger's home. At the front door she looked through the peephole. A man stood on the porch in a gray jacket, holding a folder. He wasn't a neighbor. He wasn't from church. He didn't have sympathy on his face. He had the tight patience of someone being paid to finish a job. Eleanor opened the door just enough to keep the chain latched. "Yes?" The man glanced at a paper. "Eleanor Price? That's me. I need you to confirm your date of birth." Eleanor's throat tightened. "Why?" "It's just procedure, ma'am." She didn't answer. She didn't owe him anything. But he waited, like he had all night. "March 12th, she said finally. 1951. He nodded, unhooked the chain himself with a motion that made her flinch, like he'd done this to 100 people, and slipped an envelope through the gap. "You've been served," he said. "What is this?" Her voice sounded too small. "A notice of claim," he replied, stepping back. "You have 30 days to respond." Eleanor stared at the envelope as if it might bite her. "I don't understand," she said. "My husband just died." The man's expression didn't change. "I'm sorry for your loss. My job is to deliver the papers." "Claim for what?" He looked at her like he was tired. "It's all in there." Then he turned and walked down her steps, leaving her with the porch light and the cold air and that one word, claim, hanging in her doorway like smoke. Eleanor closed the door and leaned against it. Her hands trembled as she carried the envelope into the living room. The lilies were wilting already. Their petals had started to brown, like even flowers couldn't tolerate being stuck in a room with grief. She sat at the coffee table where condolence cards were still stacked. A few hours earlier, her daughter Mary Ann had been there, sorting food containers and gently scolding Eleanor for not eating. Mary Ann lived in Harrisburg, 2 hours away. She had taken time off work, brought her teenage daughter Lily, and stayed through the funeral because she knew her mother would pretend to be strong until she broke. Mary Ann had inherited Hal's practical streak. Her hair was pulled into a tight ponytail, her sleeves always pushed up, as if she was ready to fix something. At the church she had held Eleanor's elbow and whispered, "Just keep walking, Mom. One step. That's it." Lily had stood close too, eyes red, clutching Hal's old baseball cap to her chest. She had loved her grandfather in the uncomplicated way teenagers rarely love anyone. When the last casserole dish was stacked and the last hand had been shaken, Mary Ann had hugged Eleanor in the kitchen and said, "I can come back next weekend. We'll go through bills. We'll make a plan." Eleanor had nodded and lied. "I'll be fine." Now Mary Ann and Lily were back on the highway, the taillights already gone, and the house felt like it had exhaled all warmth with them. Eleanor slid her finger under the flap of the new envelope. Her nails caught. She tried again. Inside were several pages, heavy with legal language. At the top, in bold letters, was a name she did not recognize. Everett and Klein, Attorneys at Law. Below that another title, Notice of Claim Against Estate of Harold Price. Eleanor's eyes moved down the page, searching for something that made sense. They found a number instead. 186,740, 32. Her stomach dropped. "No," she whispered, as if the paper might listen. "No, that's not—" The claim stated that Harold Price had entered into a financial agreement in 1996 and that the debt had remained unpaid. It referenced a default, a breach, and an asset recovery process, including the home at 114 Maple Street, Eleanor's home. She read it twice, then a third time because she believed that if she stared hard enough the words would rearrange themselves into something kinder. But the number stayed. The name stayed, and the threat stayed. She grabbed Hal's watch from the nightstand and held it like it could anchor her. It ticked steadily, indifferent to her panic. Hal had never mentioned a debt. They had lived modestly. They had saved. They had paid their taxes. They had argued about whether they could afford a new washer, for God's sake. "Hal," she said out loud, her voice cracking, "what did you sign?" She thought about the letter in the tin. "Come for this house. They will tell you I was a liar. They will tell you you owe them." He had known. A sound came from the hallway, just the house settling. But Eleanor jumped anyway. She forced herself to stand and walk to the closet. Her fingers dug through sweaters until she found the tin again. This time she carried it to the kitchen table under the brightest light. She untied the twine around the letters. The first envelope on top was postmarked 1996, the next 1997, then 1998. Years, an entire hidden timeline. On one envelope, Hal had written in pen, "Do not open until I'm gone." Her eyes burned. She opened the next letter after the one addressed to her. This one was addressed to Hal, but it was the kind of letter a man keeps because he can't afford to forget it. It was from a company, Ridgway Industrial Services. The letterhead was crisp, the language polished, the tone polite in the way a knife can be polite. It thanked Harold Price for his cooperation, referenced an incident at the Ridgway plant, and stated that per their agreement, all matters are considered resolved, provided he complied with confidentiality and continued good behavior. At the bottom was a signature, not Hal's, a lawyer, and beside the signature, a name that made Eleanor's skin go cold because it matched the top of the claim notice in her hand, Everett Klein. Eleanor stared at it, her heart beat loud in the kitchen. The claim wasn't new. The people coming for her house weren't strangers. They were the same people who had been circling Hal for almost 30 years. And suddenly she understood something that made her throat tighten with anger. Hal hadn't hidden these letters because he didn't trust her. He had hidden them because he was terrified of what would happen if she ever knew. Eleanor picked up Hal's first letter again. Her eyes fell to a line she hadn't fully processed. "I took blame you never deserved." Her hands clenched. Outside, the porch light flickered once, then steadied, and Eleanor realized she wasn't alone in this house anymore. Not really, because whoever had sent that man to her door tonight was still watching the address on Maple Street, and now they had started the clock. The next morning came with gray light and no mercy. Eleanor sat at the kitchen table, with a mug of coffee she didn't drink, surrounded by papers like she was building a wall out of proof. Hal's letters, the claim notice, old insurance documents, a folder labeled "Taxes, Do Not Lose." Outside, Maple Street looked normal. A dog barked. A school bus hissed at the corner. Life moved on, because life always moved on for everyone except the person left behind. Eleanor's eyes kept returning to one memory, the look on Hal's face right before he collapsed. Not pain, not surprise, fear. She opened another envelope, this one dated October 1996. Hal's handwriting was on the outside, but the letter inside was from him to her, even though he hadn't addressed it that way. "Ellie, if you ever find yourself reading this, I need you to remember what I'm about to say." She took a slow breath and kept going. "You've always blamed yourself for what happened at Ridgway. You need to stop. You did the right thing. I'm the one who made the deal." Eleanor's fingers tightened around the paper. Ridgway. She hadn't spoken that name aloud in years. Back then, she and Hal were younger, stronger in the way people are when they believe the future is guaranteed. They had bought this house in 1982, right after Hal got promoted from general labor to maintenance lead. It was a 2-bedroom with peeling paint and a porch that sagged a little. Hal had stood in the empty living room arms wide and said, "Can you believe it? It's ours." Eleanor had laughed and cried at the same time. They didn't have much, but they had each other, and in that season of their lives that felt like plenty. Ridgeway Industrial Services was the kind of plant that never really slept. It sat outside town by the river, all pipes and stacks and warning signs. People in Scranton called it the burner because at night the flames would flicker above the towers, orange against the dark. Hal worked the day shift. Eleanor, after Marianne was born, started part-time in the front office doing payroll and filing. It wasn't glamorous, but it paid for groceries and ballet lessons and the braces Marianne needed later. And it made Eleanor feel useful, like she was helping carry the weight. Then, one afternoon in September of 1996, Eleanor noticed a set of invoices that didn't match the shipping logs. Waste disposal fees charged twice. Barrels leaving the plant without proper tracking. A name on the paperwork that kept repeating, Willow Creek Transport. She asked a supervisor casually at first. He smiled too big and said, "Don't worry about that, Ellie. That's above your pay grade." The next day, a man she had never seen before stopped by her desk and asked her name. He called her Sweetheart, like it was harmless. Then he leaned down close enough that she could smell cigarettes on his breath and said quietly, "Some things don't need to be understood. Some things just need to be filed." Eleanor went home that night with her stomach tight. Hal saw it on her face before she said a word. "What happened?" he asked. "Nothing," she lied automatically. Hal didn't let it go. He never did when it mattered. She told him the truth while they stood at the sink washing dishes. She kept her voice low, as if the walls might report her. Hal listened without interrupting, water running over his hands, his jaw tightening with every sentence. When she finished, he turned off the faucet and stared at the window. "They're dumping," he said. Eleanor's eyes widened. "You think so?" Hal nodded once. "I know so. I've seen trucks leave at night. I've seen barrels with no labels. I didn't want to believe it." Eleanor swallowed. "What do we do?" Hal looked at Marianne's school photo on the fridge. 8 years old, missing a front tooth, smiling like the world was safe. "We keep our heads down," he said, and Eleanor heard the fear under the words. But Eleanor couldn't. Not once, she knew. She called a hotline she found in a booklet on workplace safety. She didn't even give her name at first. She just asked questions. The woman on the other end said, "If you have evidence, you can file a report. There are protections." Protections? That word sounded like a promise. 2 weeks later, a containment tank ruptured on the night shift. Chemical foam poured across the floor like snow. 3 men were hospitalized. One, a young father named Miguel Torres, never fully recovered his lungs. The story in the newspaper was equipment failure. The plant's statement was unavoidable accident. But Eleanor heard whispers. A valve that had been patched instead of replaced. A maintenance request ignored. An inspection delayed. And then, one Friday, Eleanor found an envelope in her car's glove box. No stamp. No return address. Just a single sheet of paper with a message typed in all caps. "Stop asking questions or your family will pay." Her hands had gone numb. She showed Hal that night. He read it once, then again, and then he folded it carefully as if he could contain the threat by making it smaller. "We go to the police," Eleanor said, her voice shaking. Hal didn't answer right away. He stood at the kitchen counter with his fists pressed into the wood, breathing slow. Then he said something that still haunted Eleanor even now. "If we go to the police, it becomes real. And if it becomes real, they'll decide how far they're willing to go." Eleanor had stared at him, stunned. "So we just do nothing?" Hal lifted his eyes to hers. In them was something she had never seen before in her husband, calculation. "We do what we have to do," he said, "to keep you and Marianne safe." In the letter in Eleanor's hands now, Hal admitted what happened next. "Klein offered me a deal. He said if I signed, they'd leave you alone. He said they'd make the tank rupture my fault, and it would end there. He said my record would be clean in a few years. I believed him because I needed to believe him." Eleanor felt tears rise, but this time they were hot with anger. Hal had taken the blame. She remembered the way people had looked at him after the incident, the rumors, the quiet distance at church, a neighbor who stopped letting their kids play together, a supervisor who couldn't find Hal's overtime requests anymore. Hal never complained. He just worked harder, came home later, and kissed Eleanor's forehead like she was something fragile. Eleanor kept reading. They made me sign a confidentiality agreement. They made me sign a promissory note tied to damages. They told me it was temporary. They told me it would be forgiven if I stayed quiet. Ellie, it was never going to be forgiven. Eleanor's breath caught. A promissory note. A debt. The number in the claim notice wasn't random. It was the price of Hal's silence. Her vision blurred as she reached the last paragraph. If you're wondering why I didn't tell you, it's because every time I looked at you I saw the life I managed to protect. I couldn't risk you carrying my burden too. And I couldn't risk you slipping up and saying the wrong name to the wrong person. Eleanor pressed her lips together, fighting the sob that wanted to tear through her. At the very bottom of the letter, Hal added a line that didn't belong to the past. It belonged to now. There's one more thing, Ellie. I didn't just sign. I also gave someone evidence. If they come after you, find the key taped under my watch case. Go to First Keystone Bank, Box 417. Eleanor's heart pounded. A key. A bank box. She looked at Hal's watch on the table. She flipped it over, examined the back, and saw a tiny strip of tape she had never noticed before. Her fingers peeled it away. A small brass key fell into her palm. And in that moment, the story of her husband's death stopped being just grief. It became a trail. One Hal had left for her, knowing he would not be there to walk it with her. Eleanor waited until noon to call Marianne because she didn't want her daughter to hear panic in her voice. Of course, Marianne heard it anyway. "Mom?" Marianne answered on the second ring. "Is everything okay?" Eleanor stared at the claim notice on the table. Her mouth was dry. "No," she said, and the honesty shocked her with its simplicity. "No, it's not." 20 minutes later, Marianne called back, already on the road. "I'm coming," she said. "I don't care what you say. I'm coming." "Marianne." "Mom, stop. Tell me what happened." So Eleanor did. Not everything, because she didn't know everything yet, but enough to make her daughter go quiet in a way that scared Eleanor more than shouting would have. "A debt?" Marianne finally said. "From 1996? That's insane." "I found letters," Eleanor said, her voice small. "He hid them. He knew." A pause. Then Marianne's voice softened. "Mom, why would Dad hide that from you?" Eleanor looked at Hal's watch, the key beside it like a tiny piece of metal that suddenly carried the weight of a whole life. "Because he thought it would keep me safe," she said. Marianne exhaled hard. "Okay, listen to me. Don't call anyone. Don't answer the door. I'll be there in 2 hours." After she hung up, Eleanor sat alone again, but it was different now. Now she had a direction. First Keystone Bank sat downtown, a brick building with columns and a flag out front. Eleanor and Hal had opened their account there when Marianne was born. She still remembered Hal lifting baby Marianne in his arms and saying, "We're doing it right, Ellie. We're building something." Now Eleanor walked into that same bank with Marianne beside her and Lily behind them, both of them wearing winter coats and worried faces. Lily's eyes darted around the lobby. "This feels like a movie," she whispered. Marianne shot her a look. "Not now." A woman behind the counter recognized Eleanor right away. "Mrs. Price," she said gently. "I'm so sorry about Harold." Eleanor nodded, unable to speak. Marianne did the talking. "We need access to a safe deposit box," she said, setting the key on the counter. "Box 417. The woman's eyes flicked to the key, then to Eleanor. Her expression shifted, almost imperceptibly, like she had seen this kind of thing before. She nodded and said, "Of course, if you'll come with me." In the back room, the air was colder. Metal drawers lined the wall like 100 locked mouths. The banker pulled out a narrow box and set it on the table. Eleanor's hand hovered over it. She could feel Hal in the room, not as a ghost, but as the weight of everything he had never said. "Mom?" Marianne whispered. "Are you sure?" Eleanor swallowed. "No," she said, "but I'm done being scared of paper." She turned the key. The box clicked open. Inside were 3 things stacked neatly. like Hal had packed them with purpose. A thick manila envelope marked evidence, a smaller envelope addressed to Mary Ann if needed, and an old cassette tape in a clear plastic case with Hal's handwriting on the label. Interview do not play until you have to. Lily leaned in, eyes wide. Grandpa had a cassette? Mary Ann lifted the manila envelope and opened it. Her face tightened as she pulled out what was inside. Copies of documents. A confidentiality agreement with Ridgway letterhead. A promissory note with Harold Price's signature, his name written in a stiff, deliberate way that looked nothing like his normal handwriting. A page of bank transfers. And photos. The photos made Eleanor's stomach twist. Barrels stacked by the river at night. A leak spreading like a dark stain into the water. A truck with Willow Creek Transport on the side, parked behind a chain-link fence. Men wearing hard hats, smiling in one frame, then in another frame looking furious, pointing toward the camera as if they had caught the photographer. Mary Ann flipped through them, jaw clenched. "Dad took these?" she asked. Eleanor shook her head slowly. "He said he gave someone evidence." Mary Ann found a printed email chain. The top line made her freeze. 2. Special Agent Daniel Marsh. Subject, Ridgway. Proof attached. From Harold Price. Eleanor's breath caught. FBI? Mary Ann's eyes flicked to her. "Mom, if Dad was talking to the FBI, this is bigger than a lawsuit." Lily's voice was small. "Is that why he died?" The words landed like a stone in the room. Eleanor's chest tightened. "I don't know," Eleanor said, and she hated the truth of it. Mary Ann pulled out the smaller envelope addressed to her. She hesitated, then tore it open. Inside was a letter from Hal, dated 3 months ago. "Mary Ann, if you're reading this, it means things went wrong faster than I hoped. I need you to do 2 things. Take care of your mother, and do not trust anyone from Ridgway or Everett and Klein. They will come in smiles. They will come in paperwork. They will tell you they're offering help. They are not." Mary Ann's eyes filled. She looked up at Eleanor like a child for a second, like she wanted her father back in the room. Eleanor reached across the table and took Mary Ann's hand. "Keep reading," Eleanor said softly. "Please." Mary Ann swallowed and continued. "I made a mistake in 1996. I thought I could carry it alone. I thought if I paid, if I stayed quiet, if I took the blame, they'd let us live. They never let you live. They just decide how much of you they'll allow to remain." At the bottom of the letter, Hal wrote a name. "If anything happens to me, find Daniel Marsh. He owes me a truth." Mary Ann stared at the name, then at the cassette tape. "We should play it," Lily said, barely above a whisper. Mary Ann looked at the banker, who had stepped back politely but was still in the room. "We'll take everything," Mary Ann said quickly, tucking the documents back into the envelope. Outside the bank, the winter air slapped Eleanor's face, sharp and clean. For a moment she felt dizzy, like she had stepped out of her own life and into someone else's. Back in the car, Mary Ann drove with both hands tight on the wheel. Lily sat in the back, clutching the cassette like it was fragile. At a stoplight, Mary Ann glanced at Eleanor. "Dad never told me any of this. He thought he was protecting us," Eleanor said. Mary Ann's voice cracked. "From what? From a company? From a debt? Mom, why didn't he just fight it?" Eleanor looked out the window at the bare trees lining the street. "Because he knew what they were capable of," she thought. "Because he saw the threat in your daughter's face and decided he would rather be hated than bury you." But what she said was simpler. He was tired, Eleanor whispered, and he was scared. When they reached Maple Street, a black SUV was parked across from Eleanor's house. It wasn't moving. It wasn't flashing lights. It was just there. Mary Ann slowed, eyes narrowing. "That wasn't there this morning," Eleanor said. Lily leaned forward, her voice tight. "Mom, someone's in the car." The SUV's window rolled down just enough for a hand to lift. Not a wave, a phone, held up like it was taking a picture. And as Mary Ann pulled into the driveway, the SUV drove away slow, like it wanted them to know it had been watching. That night, Eleanor didn't sleep. She sat in Hal's recliner with a blanket over her shoulders and his watch in her palm. turning it over and over like a worry stone. Marianne made calls from the kitchen, first to the number on the claim notice, then to a local attorney a friend from work recommended, then to the courthouse to ask what notice of claim really meant. Every call ended the same way. Polite voices, no clear answers, a quiet undertone of, "Be careful." When Marianne hung up the last time, she rubbed her forehead with both hands. "Okay," she said, trying to sound steady. "Everett and Klein are big, like statewide big, and whoever filed this claim, they're moving fast." Eleanor swallowed. "What do we do?" Marianne looked at the manila envelope from the bank, now sitting on the table like a loaded weapon. "We don't panic," Marianne said. "We get organized. We document everything. We talk to that FBI agent Dad mentioned." "Daniel Marsh," Eleanor said. Marianne nodded. "If he's real." Lily sat on the couch with her phone in her hands, scrolling. "I found a Daniel Marsh," she said, "but there are like 5. Marianne took the phone and squinted. "That could be anyone," she muttered. Eleanor watched them, her daughter and granddaughter, both of them trying to build a bridge out of thin air while she sat with grief in her chest like a trapped animal. A knock came at the door. All 3 of them froze. Eleanor's body reacted before her mind caught up. Her heart kicked hard against her ribs. She looked at Marianne, and Marianne looked back, eyes wide. Another knock, followed by a voice, calm and professional. "Mrs. Price? Eleanor Price? My name is Kenneth Harlow. I'm with Ridgeway Industrial." Marianne's jaw clenched. "No way!" Eleanor stood slowly, every muscle tight. She walked to the door and looked through the peephole. A man in a tailored coat stood on her porch, holding a leather folder. He had a smile ready, the kind that tried to cover up teeth. Marianne stepped close. "Do not open it," she whispered. Kenneth Harlow knocked again, softer now, like he was being courteous. "Mrs. Price," he called. "We heard about Harold. I wanted to express our condolences, and I'm here to help you through some, paperwork issues." Marianne mouthed, "Help," with disgust. Eleanor didn't open the door. She spoke through it, her voice louder than she felt. "What do you want?" Harlow's tone stayed smooth. "Only a conversation. Ridgeway cares about the families who helped build this town. Harold was a valued employee. We don't want any misunderstandings during an already difficult time." Eleanor's fingers tightened around the doorknob. "Misunderstandings like someone trying to take my house?" she asked. A pause. Then Harlow said, "That claim is unfortunate. It's part of an older legal matter. There may be a way to resolve it quickly, privately, and without stress." Marianne moved in front of the door, her voice sharp. "No, absolutely not. You can leave." Harlow's smile didn't change, but his eyes did. They slid to the side like he was checking the street. "I'd prefer to speak with Mrs. Price directly," he said. "She's not alone," Marianne replied. Harlow sighed gently, like Marianne was a child making things harder than they needed to be. "Mrs. Price," he called again, ignoring Marianne. "Harold and Ridgeway had an agreement. When agreements are broken, consequences happen. But there's still room for goodwill." Eleanor felt a cold wave wash through her. Agreements broken. Consequences. Hal's words echoed in her mind. They will come in smiles. They will come in paperwork. Eleanor leaned close to the door. "If you have something to say," she said, "say it to my lawyer." Harlow chuckled lightly. "Of course we can do that, but lawyers make things expensive, and I'm trying to save you money." Marianne barked a short laugh. "Get off our porch." Harlow's smile finally faded by a fraction. "Fine," he said, and his voice dropped into something more honest. "Just understand this. You have 30 days. After that it becomes complicated." Eleanor didn't answer. She didn't give him the satisfaction of fear. Harlow stepped back, slipped a business card under the door, and said quietly, almost kindly, "I'm the person you want, Mrs. Price, not the people who will come after me." Then his footsteps moved down the porch. A car door closed, an engine started, and the street went still again. Marianne picked up the business card with 2 fingers like it was dirty. "He knew Dad," she said. Eleanor stared at the card. Kenneth Harlow, Director of Community Relations. A title that sounded warm until you felt the cold underneath it. Lily's voice was thin. "So they're really coming." Marianne turned to her. "Lily, go upstairs, lock your window. Stay off social media about this, okay?" Lily bristled. "Why?" "Because someone took a picture of us today," Marianne snapped, then softened. "Please, do what I'm asking." Lily went, but she didn't hide how scared she was. After the house quieted again, Marianne opened the manila envelope and started making copies, stacking papers in neat piles. Eleanor watched her daughter's hands move fast, purposeful, like she could keep danger away by being organized enough. "You're doing good," Eleanor said. Marianne's eyes were wet. "I'm furious," she whispered. "Dad lived his whole life like this, and we didn't even know." Eleanor swallowed. "I didn't know." Marianne looked up. "Mom, did he ever say anything? Anything strange? Any warning?" Eleanor thought of Hal's last week, how he had insisted on fixing the porch step even though it was cold, how he had cleaned out the garage late at night, throwing away junk like he was racing a deadline, how he had kissed her forehead and held it there longer than usual. He said, "If anything ever happens, don't let them tell you what's true," Eleanor said. Marianne nodded slowly. "We need that agent." They waited until Lily was asleep. Then Marianne pulled out the cassette tape. Eleanor's stomach twisted at the thought of hearing Hal's voice. It had only been a week, but already it felt like a lifetime ago. Marianne found an old cassette player in a closet, something Hal had kept because he never threw anything away that still worked. The plastic was dusty. The buttons stuck. Marianne pressed play. At first there was static, then the faint sound of a room, like an office. Then Hal's voice, older but clear, saying, "My name is Harold Price. I'm doing this because I'm out of options." Eleanor clapped a hand over her mouth. A second voice, male, calm. "Harold, you understand this is being recorded. You understand the risks." Hal's voice again. "I understand. They already ruined my name. I'm not letting them ruin my wife." The tape crackled. The other man said, "Tell me about the night of the tank rupture." Hal started to speak, and suddenly upstairs something thudded. A heavy sound. Then another. Marianne shot to her feet. Eleanor's blood went cold. "Lily," she whispered. They ran to the stairs. Marianne took them 2 at a time. At the top, Lily's bedroom door was half open. The window was raised. Cold air poured in. And Lily's bed was empty. Marianne's voice cut through the hallway. "Lily." Eleanor's legs felt like they belonged to someone else as she followed, one hand gripping the banister so hard her knuckles went white. Marianne shoved Lily's door open all the way. The room was dim, lit only by the streetlight outside. The curtains fluttered with the cold draft from the open window. "Lily!" Marianne shouted again, panic cracking her voice. Eleanor's eyes scanned the room. The desk chair was tipped. A drawer was half pulled out. A hoodie lay on the floor like someone had dropped it in a hurry. Marianne rushed to the window, leaned out, and looked down at the side yard. Snow covered the ground in a thin layer. There were footprints near the fence, fresh. Eleanor's stomach turned to water. "No!" she breathed. "No, no, no!" Marianne grabbed her phone with shaking hands and dialed 911. As she spoke to the dispatcher, Eleanor moved through the room, calling Lily's name in a voice that sounded nothing like her own. She checked the closet. Empty. She checked behind the door. Nothing. Then she heard it. A faint sound from the hallway. A small whimper. Eleanor spun around. The bathroom door across the hall was closed, but there was a sliver of light underneath. Eleanor crossed the hall and pushed it open. Lily was curled in the bathtub with a towel around her shoulders, knees pulled to her chest, eyes wide and wet. "Grandma," she whispered, voice shaking. "I heard someone." Eleanor dropped to her knees beside the tub and pulled Lily into her arms. Lily's body was cold, trembling so hard her teeth clicked. "Oh, sweetheart," Eleanor murmured. "You're here. You're safe. You're here." Marianne appeared in the doorway, face drained. When she saw Lily, her knees nearly buckled. She crouched down and held her daughter's face in her hands. "Are you hurt?" Marianne asked. Lily shook her head quickly. "No. I heard something in my room, like the window latch. I didn't know what to do, so I ran. I didn't want to scream." Marianne closed her eyes and let out a strangled sound, half relief, half rage. Eleanor looked back toward Lily's room, at that open window, those footprints. Someone had been inside her house. Within minutes, 2 police cars pulled up, lights flashing across the walls. The officers were young, bundled in heavy jackets, their breath visible as they walked through the yard. One of them, a tall man with a square jaw, introduced himself as Officer Dean Rowe. When he said his name, Eleanor felt something click inside her memory. Rowe had been the one who responded to the incident at Ridgeway years ago, when Hal's name first hit the rumor mill. Rowe had been new then, still eager, still clean. Now his eyes looked tired, and his tone carried that practiced flatness of someone who didn't want paperwork. Rowe stepped into Lily's room and inspected the window latch. "It looks like it was forced," he said, then looked around at the desk, the drawer. "Anything missing?" Marianne pointed at the open drawer. "That wasn't like that." Rowe shrugged. "Teenagers leave drawers open." Marianne glared. "My daughter didn't do that. Someone was in here." Rowe's gaze slid toward Eleanor, and Eleanor felt judged in a way she couldn't name. "You mentioned on the 911 call there's a legal situation," Rowe said. "A claim notice?" Marianne stiffened. "Who told you that?" "You did," Rowe replied calmly. "The dispatcher wrote it." Marianne took a step closer. "This is not about a claim. Someone tried to get into my mother's house while my daughter was upstairs." Rowe nodded, but his nod felt empty. "We'll file a report. We'll increase patrols." Eleanor spoke up, surprising herself with the steadiness in her voice. "Officer," she said, "do you know Ridgeway Industrial?" Rowe's eyes flicked to her, then away, like he didn't want the question. "It's the biggest employer in the area," he said. "What about it?" "My husband worked there," Eleanor said, "and now their lawyer is trying to take my house." Rowe's jaw tightened slightly. "Ma'am, companies don't take houses. Courts do." Eleanor felt heat rise in her chest. "And who makes the courts move? Who makes them hurry?" Rowe looked at her for a long beat. Then he said, "I'm sorry you're going through this." It was the kind of apology that meant nothing. After the officers left, Marianne locked every window, every door. She pushed a chair under the back doorknob, like Eleanor was living in a house from another century. Lily sat at the kitchen table with her hands wrapped around a mug of cocoa. Her face was pale. Her eyes kept darting toward the hallway, like she expected shadows to step out. Eleanor sat beside her, rubbing slow circles on Lily's back. "I'm sorry," Eleanor whispered. Lily shook her head. "Grandma, it's not your fault." Eleanor couldn't stop thinking about the footprints. How close someone had been to her granddaughter. How bold they had been to try. Marianne went back to the cassette player like it was the only solid thing in the room. "We're listening," she said, voice low and hard. "We're not stopping." She pressed play again. Hal's voice filled the kitchen, soft but clear. "I saw them dumping at night," he said. "I took pictures. I kept copies of paperwork. When Ellie got threatened, I panicked. I thought I could bargain. I thought if I sacrificed my name I could buy her safety." The other man, Daniel Marsh, said, "And did it work?" Hal's laugh was bitter. "For a while. They left her alone. They left Marianne alone. But they didn't leave me alone. They kept the note. They kept it alive, like a chain." Marianne's face twisted. Hal continued. "Then Miguel Torres got sick. He wasn't supposed to live, and when he did, he started talking. That's when they started tightening up. That's when they reminded me what I owed." Marsh said, "They reminded you how?" Hal hesitated. The tape crackled. Then he said, "They sent a man to my house. Community relations. Friendly. Smiling. But he told me, 'Your wife is getting older. Accidents happen. Don't make us deal with problems.'" Eleanor's blood ran cold. Marianne whispered, "Kenneth Harlow." Lily's eyes widened. That guy on the porch? Eleanor nodded slowly, feeling nausea rise. Hal's voice on the tape got quieter, like he was ashamed of what he had to admit. I started having chest pain last year, he said. I went to the doctor. I got pills. I thought it was age. Then I found a note on my truck. It said, "Stop talking to Marsh or she'll lose everything." Marsh's voice was firm. "Harold, have you been talking to us recently?" Hal sighed. "Yes. I reached out again because I realized if I die, they'll come for Ellie. The debt is designed to survive me." Marianne's hands clenched into fists. Hal's voice wavered for the first time. "I don't want my wife to be punished for my fear." The tape clicked as if someone shifted in a chair. Marsh said, "Harold, if you're telling the truth, we can build a case. But you have to understand. Ridgway has money, lawyers, connections. People get scared." Hal replied, "I've been scared my whole life. I'm done." Eleanor felt tears slip down her face, silent, unstoppable. Then the tape played a sound that made Eleanor sit up straight. A metallic clink, a door opening. Hal said quietly, "Someone's here." Marsh asked, "Who?" Hal didn't answer. There was a muffled voice in the background, too faint to make out. Then Hal spoke again, and the calm was gone from his tone. "Marsh," he said, "if anything happens to me, you tell my wife the truth. You hear me? You don't let them bury this." The tape hissed with static. Marsh said, louder now, "Harold, Harold, what's going on?" A thud, a sharp intake of breath. Then, abruptly, the recording ended with a click. Silence filled the kitchen. Lily whispered, "Was that the night Grandpa died?" Marianne shook her head slowly, eyes fixed on the cassette player like it had betrayed her. "It's dated 3 months ago," she said, voice tight. "But that ending—" Eleanor stared at Hal's watch on the table. The second hand moved, steady, like time didn't care what secrets it carried. Marianne reached into the manila envelope again and pulled out one last document she hadn't read. A medical report. Her eyes scanned it. Then her face went stiff. "Mom," Marianne said, voice barely above a whisper, "Dad's cardiologist noted something. He wrote that Dad reported unexplained episodes after drinking from his work thermos." Eleanor's throat tightened. "His thermos?" Marianne looked up, eyes wide with dawning horror. "He kept that thermos with him every day," Marianne said. "Even after retirement. He used it at home." Eleanor's mind flashed to the kitchen sink. Hal rinsing a plate, his thermos sitting on the counter, the last sip he took before he grabbed his chest. Lily's voice shook. "Are you saying someone—" Marianne didn't finish the sentence, because they all understood the same terrifying possibility at the same time. Hal hadn't just been afraid when he died. He might have been right to be afraid. By morning, Marianne had turned the kitchen into a war room. She taped a sheet of paper to the wall and wrote 3 columns in thick marker. What we know. What we need. Who can help? Eleanor watched her daughter work and felt something unfamiliar rising beneath the grief. Not hope, exactly. Resolve. Lily sat at the table with headphones around her neck, scrolling through old photos of her grandfather on her phone. Every few minutes she wiped her eyes and pretended she wasn't crying. Eleanor moved through the house like a person learning her own rooms again. She picked up Hal's thermos from the sink and stared at it. It was plain stainless steel, dented at the bottom, the kind you could drop 100 times and it would still keep coffee hot. Hal had loved that thermos. He had said it was honest. It did one job and did it well. Eleanor twisted the lid off and sniffed. Just faint coffee. Nothing else. And yet the idea of it made her skin crawl. Marianne called the FBI field office listed online for Scranton. She was put on hold 3 times. She argued with a receptionist. Then she said, loud enough for Eleanor to hear across the room, "My father was a cooperating witness in a federal environmental case. His name was Harold Price. He's dead. And someone is trying to take my mother's home." There was a long pause. Then the receptionist said, "One moment." Marianne's face went still. She held the phone to her ear like it might explode. After another minute, a man's voice came on the line. Calm, controlled, older than Marianne expected. "This is Special Agent Daniel Marsh," he said. "Who am I speaking to?" Marianne swallowed. "Marianne Price, Harold's daughter." Silence, then a quiet exhale. "I'm sorry," Marsh said. "I heard about Harold last week. I was trying to get up there." Marianne's eyes filled, but her voice stayed hard. "You didn't." "I should have," Marsh replied. "Where are you?" Marianne gave the address. Marsh hesitated. "I can't come to your house. Not right now. Too many eyes. Meet me somewhere public." "Where?" Marianne asked. "Benson's Diner on Route 6, Marsh said. 2:00. Bring nothing you can't afford to lose, and don't tell anyone you're going." Marianne looked at Eleanor. Eleanor nodded. Her stomach was knotted, but she nodded anyway. At 2:00 they sat in a booth at Benson's Diner, the kind of place with cracked vinyl seats and coffee that tasted like it had been boiled since the 80s. A waitress topped off their cups without asking questions. Truckers ate in silence. A couple argued softly near the window. Marsh arrived 5 minutes late. He was in his 50s, with tired eyes and a posture that made it clear he had learned to watch doors. He slid into the booth across from them and didn't smile. He looked at Eleanor and his face softened just a fraction. "Mrs. Price," he said quietly, "I'm sorry. Harold loved you. He talked about you like you were the only good thing he ever did." Eleanor's throat tightened so hard she could barely speak. "All I want," she managed, "is to know why this is happening." Marsh nodded once. "Because Ridgway never stops cleaning up after itself." Marianne slid the manila envelope across the table. Marsh didn't open it. He just rested his hand on it like he was feeling the weight. "Harold gave me pieces," Marsh said. "Photos, copies, names. Enough to raise questions, not enough to lock anyone down. He told me there was one document that tied it all together. A ledger, internal disposal tracking with signatures. We never got it." Eleanor's heart pounded. "Did he have it?" Marsh's eyes flicked to hers. "He told me he did. He said he had it somewhere safe, and he was going to hand it over when he felt sure you and Marianne would be protected. He was terrified of what they'd do if he moved too soon." Marianne's voice cracked. "So you just waited?" Marsh's jaw tightened. "I pushed when I could. But cases like this don't move on righteousness. They move on proof and politics." Eleanor felt anger flare, but she forced it down. She didn't have the energy for blame. Not yet. Marianne leaned forward. "Someone tried to break into the house last night, and there's a debt claim tied to a promissory note. That's how they're trying to take Mom's home." Marsh's eyes sharpened. "The note is their leash. They designed it to survive Harold. It's how they keep families quiet across generations." Eleanor's hands shook under the table. Marianne said, "We have a recording." Marsh's gaze flicked to her. "You listened?" Marianne nodded. "It ended badly." Marsh's mouth tightened. "I remember that day. Harold called me and said someone was at his door. Then the line went dead. When I tried to follow up, he told me it was nothing. He lied to protect you even then." Eleanor whispered, "Was he poisoned?" Marsh's eyes held hers for a long moment. "I don't have proof," he said. "But Harold told his doctor about feeling strange after drinking from his thermos. And 2 other people connected to this case reported similar episodes years ago. Both were written off as heart problems." Marianne's face went pale. Marsh slid a small evidence bag across the table. "If you still have the thermos, put it in this. Don't rinse it. Don't handle it without gloves. I can get it to a lab." Eleanor stared at the bag like it was an accusation. Marsh continued, "Here's what you do next. You do not meet with Ridgway. You do not sign anything. You keep copies of every document in more than one place. And you find that ledger." Marianne asked, "How?" Marsh looked down at the manila envelope and finally opened it. He flipped through the photos, the agreements, the email. Then he pulled out one picture and held it up. It showed Hal in a hard hat standing near a storage yard. Behind him, half visible, was a red metal container with a stenciled number. Marsh tapped the number with his finger. "Harold told me this number mattered," he said. "He said it was connected to the ledger. Do you recognize it?" Eleanor leaned in, squinting. Her mind searched through decades. Then she remembered the old storage unit Hal rented for tools after the incident. He had kept it for years, paying cash, never giving Eleanor the key because, he said, "It's a mess." Eleanor's breath caught. "He has a storage unit," she whispered. "He always said it was just junk." Marianne's eyes widened. "Do you have the key?" Eleanor shook her head, then froze. Hal's watch. The tape under the case. A key. But that key was for the bank box. How many keys had he hidden? Marcia's voice dropped. "If the ledger is anywhere, it's in a place like that. And if Ridgway finds out you're looking, they'll move first." Eleanor sat back, heart racing. For the first time, the path in front of her looked clear, and it also looked dangerous. As they stood to leave, Marsh said one more thing quietly, like he didn't want the diner walls to hear. "Mrs. Price," he said, "Harold told me he'd rather die than let them touch you. That wasn't a metaphor. So when you go looking for what he hid, go like someone who understands what you're up against." Eleanor nodded. Outside, the winter wind cut across the parking lot. Marianne unlocked the car, and on the windshield, tucked under the wiper blade, was a fresh piece of paper. No envelope. No stamp. Just a message typed in all caps. "We see you." Back at the house, Eleanor felt like she was seeing Hal's habits through a new lens. Every "just in case" suddenly looked like a breadcrumb. Every drawer, every jar of screws, every labeled coffee can felt like it might contain a piece of him he never let her meet. They searched quietly, methodically. Marianne checked Hal's desk. Lily checked the garage, armed with a flashlight and a stubbornness that made Eleanor both proud and scared. Eleanor went back to Hal's watch. She opened the small leather case Hal kept in the top dresser drawer. It was scuffed, the hinges loose. Inside, alongside a polishing cloth, she noticed a seam along the lining that didn't look right. Her fingers pressed it. Something hard sat beneath. Eleanor's breath caught. She slid a butter knife under the fabric and lifted gently. A second key was taped inside, flat against the lining. Marianne's eyes widened when Eleanor held it up. "Dad," Marianne whispered, half awe, half heartbreak. He planned everything. The storage facility was 20 minutes outside town, a row of corrugated metal doors behind a chain-link fence. A faded sign out front read, "Riverbend Storage. Secure access 24/7. Eleanor hated the word secure now. Everything people called secure seemed to be exactly what could be taken. They drove in under a camera on a pole. Marianne glanced up at it and muttered, "Smile. We're already on tape." Inside the office, a bored man behind the counter looked up. "Can I help you?" he asked. Eleanor placed the key on the counter. "My husband rented a unit here, Harold Price. He passed away." The man's expression shifted into practiced sympathy. "Sorry to hear that. Do you have the lease paperwork?" Eleanor shook her head. "He kept it. I'm his wife." The man hesitated, then said, "We need documentation." Marianne slid her driver's license across the counter. "We have his death certificate on our phone. We can show you. This unit is part of his estate." The man looked between them, then sighed. "Unit number?" he asked. Eleanor didn't know. Hal had never said it. Marianne pulled out her phone and showed him a photo from the bank box, the one with the red container number. She pointed. This number meant something to him. "Do you have a unit with that on the door?" The man squinted, then typed into his computer. His fingers paused. His face tightened just slightly. "We have a unit," he said slowly, "but it's not labeled like that." "That looks like a container ID." Eleanor's heart pounded. "Can you check the account name?" The man typed again, then nodded. "Harold Price, yeah. Unit B17. Marianne's shoulders relaxed a fraction. The man slid a clipboard toward them. "Sign in, and you'll need to use the gate code. It's on file." Marianne narrowed her eyes. "What gate code?" The man shrugged. "The one he set up." Eleanor felt a chill. Hal had set up codes, keys, boxes. How many layers had he built between her and the truth? They drove to the rows of units, breath visible as they stepped out. B row was toward the back, quieter, shielded from the road. Unit B-17 sat between two others, a plain gray door with a padlock. Marianne inserted the key and turned. The lock opened too easily. Eleanor frowned. That shouldn't... Marianne pulled on the door handle. It slid up with a groan. Inside, the air was stale and cold. A single bare bulb hung from the ceiling. Stacks of boxes lined the walls, labeled in Hal's handwriting. Receipts, photos, tools, Marianne. Keep Ellie. Eleanor's eyes filled at that last one. Then she saw the floor. Someone had been here. A box was overturned, its contents scattered. Old papers lay in a messy fan across the concrete. A toolbox sat open, drawers pulled out. Marianne cursed under her breath. Lily's voice was tight. They got here first. Eleanor stepped inside and felt her knees weaken. Hal's secret space had been violated. It felt like someone had broken into his mind. Marianne knelt and began gathering papers, scanning quickly. Receipts, she muttered. Old tax copies. Photos. Then her hand stopped. She held up a thin notebook with a spiral binding. The cover was stained. Inside were columns of numbers written in careful handwriting. Marianne's eyes widened. Mom, look. Eleanor leaned in. The entries listed dates, truck IDs, disposal sites, quantities. Next to them were initials. Some pages had names, full names. And on the inside back cover, Hal had written one line. They dumped it in Willow Creek. This proves it. Marianne's breath hitched. This is the ledger. Eleanor's hands shook as she touched the notebook. It felt heavier than paper should. Then Lily pointed at the far wall. What's that? A metal cabinet stood there, slightly ajar. Marianne opened it and found a bundle of folders, but also a small sealed plastic tube taped to the back. Inside the tube was a USB drive. On the tape, Hal had written, "For Marsh." Marianne stared at it like it was a key to a locked door. "We have to get this to him," she whispered. Eleanor looked around the unit again, scanning for what else might be missing. On the floor near the overturned box, she found a torn corner of paper. Just a fragment. But on it, in printed text, was the name Everett and Klein. Her stomach tightened. "Marianne," she said softly. "They were here." Marianne's face hardened. Then, "They know we know." As they packed the ledger and the USB into a bag, the storage facility's gate beeped in the distance. A car engine rolled down the row, slow. Marianne froze. The sound stopped near their unit. Footsteps on gravel. A shadow fell across the open doorway. Eleanor's heart slammed against her ribs. A voice spoke from outside, calm, familiar, as if he was greeting old friends. "Mrs. Price," Kenneth Harlow said. "You really should have called me first." Kenneth Harlow stood just outside the storage unit, hands in his coat pockets, as if he had wandered down the row by accident. His hair was perfectly combed. His smile was polite. His eyes were not. Marianne stepped forward, blocking the doorway with her body. "You're trespassing," she said. Harlow's smile widened. "This facility is private property. Ridgway has business here, and I'm not here to fight." Lily moved behind Eleanor, gripping her arm. Eleanor could feel her granddaughter trembling. Harlow glanced at Lily, and Eleanor's stomach tightened. "You brought the kid," Harlow said lightly. "That's bold." Marianne's voice sharpened. "Don't talk about my daughter." Harlow lifted his hands in a gesture of peace. Okay, look, this doesn't need to be dramatic. Harold was a good man. He made a hard choice a long time ago. Ridgway honored that choice. But now there's confusion. Eleanor heard the word confusion and felt rage flicker. Confusion was what people called truth when they wanted it quiet. "There's no confusion," Eleanor said, stepping forward despite the fear in her legs. "You're trying to take my home." Harlow looked at her like he was disappointed. "Mrs. Price," he said softly, "I'm trying to keep you in your home. That claim notice? That's the legal machine. Once it's moving, it doesn't care about feelings. I'm the one person who can slow it down." Marianne pulled her phone out and held it at her side, thumb hovering near the record button. Harlow noticed anyway. He always noticed. "Recording me?" he asked, amused. "Smart. But you should know. Lawyers love recordings. They can make them say whatever they want. Marianne hit record anyway. "Why are you here?" she asked. "How did you know we were here?" Harlow's smile didn't move. People talk. People see cars. People like to be helpful. Eleanor's heart pounded. "We see you." Harlow took one step closer, stopping just outside the threshold. "I'm going to be very clear," he said. "You have something that belongs to Ridgeway. A notebook, a drive, things Harold took. If you hand them over, we can make the claim disappear. We can even help with, funeral expenses, medical bills, whatever you need." Marianne let out a short, harsh laugh. "So this is a bribe." Harlow's eyes sharpened. "Call it a solution." Eleanor looked at him and suddenly saw the truth behind his job title. Community relations. He wasn't there to relate. He was there to contain. "What if we don't?" Eleanor asked. Harlow's voice stayed calm. "Then the claim proceeds. The house becomes an asset. The court orders a sale. You move into something smaller, maybe with family. It will be uncomfortable, but you'll survive." Marianne's jaw clenched. "And if we give you the evidence, what happens?" Harlow shrugged. "You grieve. You move on. You live your life. Quiet." Eleanor felt a surge of emotion so strong it made her dizzy. She pictured Hal at the sink, humming. Hal working overtime. Hal swallowing his pride every time someone looked at him like he was dirty. Hal doing all of that so she could live her life. Quiet. She stepped forward until she was close enough to smell Harlow's cologne. It was expensive, sharp, out of place among rust and cold concrete. "My husband died," Eleanor said, voice shaking but loud. "He died scared. And you're standing here offering me money like he was just a paperwork issue." Harlow's eyes flickered, a tiny crack in his mask. Then he smiled again, colder this time. "Harold died because his heart gave out," he said. "That happens when you carry stress for too long." Marianne's voice snapped. "You poisoned him." Harlow's eyebrows lifted. "That's a serious accusation." Eleanor watched his face. He didn't look shocked. He looked careful. Marianne stepped closer. "We have a recording of him with an FBI agent. We have the ledger. We have proof. If you touch my mother's house, if you come near my daughter again, I will bury your company." Harlow's gaze slid to Lily again, just for a second. Then he leaned in slightly, lowering his voice like he was sharing a secret. "Do you know what happens when people try to burn a big company?" he asked softly. "The company doesn't burn. The person does." Eleanor felt Lily's grip tighten on her arm. Harlow straightened and sighed as if he was tired of this. "Last offer," he said. "Hand me the drive and the notebook. Walk away. Keep your home. Keep your peace." Marianne's thumb hovered over her phone screen. Eleanor could see the tension in her daughter's neck, the fight in her eyes, the fear she was trying not to show. And Eleanor realized something. Marianne was willing to sacrifice herself now the way Hal had. To protect Eleanor. To protect Lily. Eleanor couldn't let that happen. She turned to Marianne, voice quiet. "Give me the notebook." Marianne blinked. "Mom, give it to me," Eleanor repeated. Marianne hesitated, then handed Eleanor the ledger. Eleanor held it in both hands. The notebook felt like a heart, still beating with Hal's truth. She looked at Harlow. Then, very slowly, she walked to the edge of the unit and placed the notebook on the concrete floor. Behind her, not in front of him. Harlow's eyes narrowed. "This isn't a handoff," he said. Eleanor's voice steadied. "No," she said. "This is me deciding that my husband's life meant more than your threats." Harlow's smile vanished completely. Eleanor continued, louder now, her words sharp and clear. "You came to my porch with condolences," she said. "You came to my granddaughter's window in the night. You sent a man to serve papers like my grief was a deadline. And now you're here trying to buy my silence." Harlow's jaw tightened. Eleanor lifted her chin. "You can't have it." For a moment, no one moved. The cold air hummed. A faraway gate beeped again. Then Harlow reached into his pocket and pulled out his phone. He tapped the screen once, then held it to his ear. "Dean?" he said, voice casual. like he was calling a friend. "Yeah, I'm at Riverbend. I need you to come down here. We have a situation." Eleanor's stomach clenched. Officer Rowe. Marianne's eyes flashed. "Of course." Harlow lowered the phone and looked at them like he had already won. "Harold taught you to be brave," he said, almost kindly. "But bravery doesn't stop deputies with badges." Lily's voice shook. "Mom." Marianne grabbed the bag with the USB and clutched it to her chest. Eleanor's mind raced. If the police came, they could take the evidence. They could claim it was stolen property. They could bury it in procedure. Eleanor stepped closer to Marianne and whispered, "Go." Marianne's eyes widened. "What?" "Go," Eleanor repeated, urgent. "Take Lily. Take the drive. I'll slow him down." Marianne shook her head. "Mom, no." Eleanor grabbed Marianne's wrist with surprising strength. "You have your father's fire," Eleanor whispered. "Use it. Go now." Marianne's eyes filled. She looked at her mother. Really looked like she was seeing her not as a fragile widow but as a woman who had survived decades of quiet war without even knowing the name of it. Marianne nodded once. She pulled Lily by the sleeve. They stepped out of the unit and started walking fast down the row, trying not to run. Harlow watched them, then looked at Eleanor. "You think that's going to work?" he asked. Eleanor's voice was low. "I think my husband didn't die for me to hand you his truth like a tip." Harlow's eyes hardened. "I'm going to take what I came for," he said. Footsteps crunched on gravel in the distance. A radio squawked faintly. A patrol car engine. Officer Rowe was coming. And Eleanor stood in the doorway of the storage unit, alone, with Hal's ledger at her feet, waiting to see what kind of world would choose truth over power. Officer Dean Rowe pulled up in a cruiser that rolled too slowly down the storage row, like it wanted to be seen. He parked at an angle that blocked the exit and stepped out, one hand resting near his belt. Behind him, Kenneth Harlow stood with his arms crossed, calm as a man watching a bill get paid. Rowe's eyes landed on Eleanor in the doorway. "Mrs. Price," he said, voice flat. "What's going on?" Eleanor lifted her chin. "Someone broke into my husband's unit," she said. "And now this man is trying to take my property." Rowe glanced at Harlow. Mr. Harlow called it in as a suspected theft of company documents. Eleanor's stomach tightened. Company documents. Of course that was the angle. "That notebook is mine," Eleanor said. "It belongs to my husband." Rowe stepped closer, his boots crunching on gravel. "Ma'am, if Ridgway says it's stolen proprietary material, I have to secure it." "Secure it where?" Eleanor asked. "In your trunk? In a drawer? In a place I'll never see again?" Rowe's jaw tightened. "Don't make this hard." Eleanor looked past him at Harlow. Harlow met her gaze without blinking. "This is what you meant," Eleanor said quietly. "Badges." Rowe's patience thinned. "Mrs. Price, step aside." Eleanor didn't move. Rowe's voice sharpened. "If you interfere with an investigation, I can arrest you." Eleanor felt fear flare, but it didn't control her the way it used to. She thought of Hal. She thought of the letters. She thought of Lily's trembling body in the bathtub. "If you arrest me," Eleanor said, "you arrest a widow for holding her husband's notebook. That's your legacy." Rowe's eyes flickered. For a second, Eleanor saw uncertainty there, like even he wasn't sure how far he wanted to go. Then Harlow stepped closer, voice smooth. "Officer," he said, "we don't want a scene. Just recover the materials. That's all." Rowe nodded, reassured by authority in a suit. Eleanor's heart pounded. She could almost hear the sound of Marianne's car speeding away with the USB, her daughter taking the risk Hal had always tried to keep from her. Rowe reached out, hand toward the notebook on the floor. Eleanor moved, fast for her age, and slid the notebook behind her foot. Rowe's eyes narrowed. "Ma'am," he warned. Eleanor's voice shook. "It's proof," she said. "It's proof of what they did." Rowe's face hardened. "I don't care about your theories. I care about procedure." A car engine roared at the end of the row. Another vehicle turned in fast, tires crunching hard. A dark sedan, not a cruiser. It stopped behind Rowe's car, boxed in by the narrow lane. A man stepped out in a plain coat, badge on a chain around his neck. Daniel Marsh. Rose stiffened immediately. Harlow's expression didn't change, but his eyes sharpened. Marsh walked toward them with measured steps, like he was walking into a room where everyone already had a weapon. "Dean," Marsh said, nodding at Roe. "Long time." Roe's mouth tightened. "Federal business here?" Marsh's gaze flicked to Eleanor. "Yes." Harlow stepped forward. "Agent Marsh," he said pleasantly, "this is unnecessary. We're simply recovering stolen company property." Marsh didn't smile. "Kenneth," he said, and the way he said the name told Eleanor he had wanted to say it for years. Marsh turned to Roe. "Dean, step back. This evidence is connected to an active federal investigation." Roe bristled. "I haven't seen a warrant." Marsh nodded. "You're right. You haven't." Eleanor's heart sank. Harlow's smile returned, slow and confident. Marsh continued, voice firm. "But you've also got a report from last night about an attempted break-in at Mrs. Price's residence, and now you have Mr. Harlow showing up at a storage unit tied to Harold Price's estate within 24 hours of that report. That's enough to raise questions." Roe looked between them. Caught. Harlow's jaw tightened slightly. Marsh turned to Eleanor. "Mrs. Price," he said quietly, "I need you to hand me the notebook." Eleanor hesitated. Marsh met her eyes. "Not for Ridgway," he said. "For the case. For your protection." Eleanor swallowed. Handing it over felt like surrender. But keeping it here, in front of Roe and Harlow, felt like suicide. She bent down, picked up the notebook, and held it out to Marsh. Harlow's smile vanished. "No," Harlow said sharply. "That's property of Ridgway." Marsh didn't look at him. He slid the notebook into a sealed evidence bag and clipped it shut. "File your complaint," Marsh said calmly. "We'll see you in federal court." Harlow's eyes flashed with something ugly. Then his face smoothed again. "You think this changes anything?" Harlow asked. Marsh's voice stayed even. "It changes the timeline." Roe shifted, uncomfortable. He looked at Marsh. "If you're taking that, I need it logged." Marsh nodded. "It will be." Roe's gaze slid to Eleanor. Something like shame flickered there, then disappeared. "Mrs. Price," Roe said, tone stiff, "we'll follow up about your home report." Eleanor held his gaze. "Do," she said, "and this time, take it seriously." Roe turned and walked back to his cruiser. He didn't look at Harlow on the way. He didn't look at Eleanor either. Harlow stepped closer to Eleanor, voice low so only she could hear. "Your husband should have stopped," he murmured. "You can still stop." Eleanor's hands trembled, but she didn't back up. "My husband stopped breathing," she said quietly. "Not fighting." Harlow's eyes tightened. Then he smiled again, thin as paper. "Enjoy your little crusade," he said. "The system always wins." He walked away, coat swaying, phone already in his hand. Marsh watched him go, his face grim. Eleanor whispered, "Will this help?" Marsh's voice softened. "It's a start," he said, "but it won't be enough without a witness who can connect the dumping to the decision-makers." Marianne's car appeared at the end of the row then, turning in slowly. Marianne stepped out with Lily, both of them pale, both of them holding their breath. Marsh's eyes flicked to them. "You got away?" Marianne nodded. "We have the drive. It's in the car. We didn't stop." Marsh let out a slow breath. "Good." Lily looked at Marsh, voice shaking. Is this going to matter?" Marsh met her eyes. "It already does," he said, "because it means your grandfather wasn't crazy. He wasn't just afraid. He was right." Marianne asked, "Who's the witness?" Marsh hesitated, then said, "Miguel Torres. He was there the night of the rupture. He saw the aftermath. He knows where they dumped. Harold told me Miguel kept a copy of a shipping manifest with signatures." Eleanor's heart pounded. "Can we talk to him?" Marsh nodded slowly. "We tried months ago. He was scared. But he agreed to meet Harold last fall. That's why Harold reached out again." Marianne's voice went tight. "So where is he now?" Marsh's phone buzzed. He glanced at the screen and his face changed. He answered, listening. His posture stiffened. His eyes narrowed. When he hung up, the cold in his expression spread to all of them. "What?" Marianne asked. Marsh looked at Eleanor, then at Marianne. "Miguel Torres didn't show up for work today," he said quietly. "His sister called it in. She said his apartment door was open." Eleanor felt a wave of nausea. Marsh continued, voice low. "And she said there was a note on his kitchen table." Marianne's hands clenched. "What did it say?" Marsh swallowed. "It said, 'Stop digging.'" "No." 2 days later, Eleanor stood in the same living room where the lilies had wilted and the condolence cards had piled up, but the air felt steadier, like the house had finally stopped holding its breath. Miguel Torres was alive. Marsh found him at a respiratory clinic in Wilkes Barre, after Lily remembered her grandfather used to drive Miguel there when his lungs acted up. Miguel had left his apartment door open as a desperate misdirection, hoping it would buy time. He was terrified, but he was done hiding. At Eleanor's kitchen table, Miguel slid a folded shipping manifest to Agent Marsh. Old paper, clear signatures, the missing link. Marianne opened the USB, and internal emails filled the screen. Altered disposal logs, after-hours routes, managers approving it, and Kenneth Harlow copied on threads about containment. Within 48 hours, a federal judge froze the asset recovery action tied to Harold Price's promissory note. The claim didn't vanish, but it stopped advancing. And for the first time since Hal collapsed at the sink, Eleanor felt the ground hold. That night, after Marianne and Lily fell asleep on the couch, Eleanor opened the last envelope Hal had left for her. "Ellie, I wish I could have told you everything while I still had a voice, but I was afraid my truth would become your burden. If there's one thing I need you to believe, it's this. I didn't sacrifice myself for a company. I sacrificed my comfort, my pride, and eventually my body for you, because loving you was the only thing I ever did without fear." Eleanor pressed the paper to her lips and cried, not the helpless crying of the funeral, but the kind that comes when a wound finally meets air. In the weeks that followed, she told the story out loud. At a town meeting, with cameras rolling, Eleanor held Hal's watch and said, "Silence was never safety. Silence was their power." Miguel spoke. Marianne spoke. And when Ridgway's lawyers tried to make Harold look like a criminal, the evidence wouldn't let them. If you're listening right now, hit like, subscribe, and tell me in the comments where you're watching from. Not for numbers, for the reminder that ordinary people aren't invisible. By spring, the river cleanup started. The company didn't offer a warm apology, but the work began, and the water ran clearer than it had in years. Eleanor kept the house on Maple Street. She planted a young maple tree in the yard and placed a simple bench beneath it. Harold Price. He kept his promises. On warm evenings, Eleanor sat there with Lily beside her, Hal's watch ticking softly in her pocket. And when grief rose, because it always rose, she didn't fight it with denial. She let it be what it was. Love refusing to disappear.